Chapter 16 The Night of Conspiracies. As Daenerys left the room, Lorien thought again about what he was about to do. Throw this city into total chaos. Only when everyone needed him would he have the power to control this huge city with millions of inhabitants. Seastorm. Lorien spoke in a gust of wind accompanied by the smell of rain hung over the place. A beautiful bird with white and gold feathers perched on the arm of the sofa the demigod was sitting on. Its feathery head rubbed gently against his cheek. I need you to transform into a human and attack Joran, but don't kill him, leave him seriously injured, and after Garrick arrives, run away without any hesitation. Lorien explained in a calm and simple tone. He didn't need complicated plans. The more complicated a plan, the more likely they were. Besides, he didn't need complicated plans. The hatred between Joran and Doreno would do the job for him. As long as Joran was seriously injured, the first person he would accuse was Doreno. When that happened, Lorien would just have to send Seastorm to hurt Doreno and wait for them both to kill each other. Once that happened, Lorien would just have to wait for the benefits, as both sides were trying to conquer him. They would give him more power, more gold, and anything else he wanted or even longed for. They would give him everything. Seastorm let out a high-pitched, piercing but extremely excited cry and soon changed into a human, but his appearance surprised Lorien, or rather his height. He was a slender dwarf in black robes, with only his golden eyes exposed. Seeing Seastorm's appearance, Lorien's lips twitched unnaturally, and he felt that spending hours watching ninja movies with Seastorm wasn't the wisest thing to do. But why a dwarf ninja? Lorien was confused, but he didn't care. The appearance was entirely the choice of his companion in arms, and it didn't really matter what he looked like. Seastorm, seeing that Lorien had no further orders, turned into lightning and wind, disappearing from the bastard prince's sight. I have to create an organization that will do my dirty work. Seastorm isn't suited to that kind of work. In the end, it's all because I have no foothold in this world, and without a solid foundation, I can't create an army or even an espionage and assassination organization. Lorien let out a sigh, but he wasn't discouraged. He had been in this world for just over 4 days. He had plenty of time to create the foundations of his reign. Suddenly, the doors opened abruptly and an Olsen with a sweaty face but a look full of excitement appeared before Lorien. What, are you going to be a father? Seeing his appearance, Lorien asked curiously. As they lived together, it was rare for Olsen to show this kind of reaction, showing that something incredibly good had just happened, and from the look on his face, it didn't seem simple. My lord, the highest religious authority of the Red Religion has arrived and has respectfully requested an audience with you. Olsen managed to breathe normally and spoke with a big smile on his lips. He really felt that his luck was changing. People he never thought he would see or even talk to appeared one after the other in front of him. How could he not be happy? Lorien didn't show much reaction to Olsen's words. Knowing that R'hllor had been watching him since he arrived on this planet, he wasn't surprised that the high priest of the Temple of Light of Volantis had arrived. However, Lorien was not against working with R'hllor. The Red God wanted to use him against the Night King and the Cold God. Lorien also wanted to use the Red God to strengthen himself and build a kingdom for him, and if possible help him become a god. It was a solid exchange of interests and quite advantageous for both sides, especially for Lorien, who would inevitably have to face the Night King in the future. So it was better to work with R'hllor and gain more benefits. Bring them to me, Lorien said with a smile, sensing that things were going very well. Once the conspiracy begins, it seemed he was closer to conquering Myr and then the other 2 free cities around it. Olsen quickly left the office and returned a few minutes later with 2 tall men, wearing red robes without any adornment or opulence. It was hard to imagine that this man was one of the most powerful in Essos. Your Grace, it is an honor to be welcomed into your home. May the flames warm you with hope and blessings. Venero looked at Lorien and spoke with a respectful tone. Seeing Lorien in person seemed to make him very happy. Venero is a tall, thin man with a skeletal face and a mouth without lips. His skin is as white as milk. Tattoos of red flames cover his cheeks, chin and shaved head. He was dressed simply, with only a red tunic. Pointing to the man next to him, Venero introduced him in a firm but surprisingly gentle voice. This is Makoro, the Black Flame of Volantis. Your Grace. Makoro greeted Lorien with respect, his loud, booming voice matching his helpless appearance. Makoro's skin is black as tar, darker than coal or jet. He is a monstrous man, huge, over 6 feet tall and as wide as 2 men, with a belly like a rock. A tangle of pure white hair grows across his face like a lion's mane. Crossing his legs over each other, Lorien leaned his elbow on the arm of the sofa and placed his chin in the palm of his hand. Looking at both men before him, Lorien spoke with a truly admiring tone. Seeing into the future really is an enviable skill. Why was any ability involving time and space powerful? Because it was rare and unpredictable, ordinary people can never even touch these two extremely high concepts. The most incredible thing is that every priest and priestess of the Red Religion has the chance to achieve such a broken ability. All that is given to us is by my God. Bonero smiled, seeing that Lorien was truly in awe of R'hllor's abilities. Even gods were envious of R'hllor. As a believer in the Red God, nothing could be happier than that. But it's the first time I've seen a god in the flesh. Bonero looked at Lorien and spoke with a respectful tone. To respect Lorien's status was to respect R'hllor, which was why he truly respected Lorien. I'm not a god, Lorien replied in a calm, even indifferent tone. In my eyes, you are a god, no matter what you say, said Bonero with a smile on his lipless face. Lorien rolled his eyes. I guess you've never seen a real god, then. Certainly, you're the first I've seen in the flesh, Bonero nodded, his voice taking on a slight tone of satisfaction. I hope I've met your expectations, Lorien said sarcastically. You met them, even exceeded them, the high priest seemed to selectively ignore his sarcasm. Bonero shook his head and reaffirmed with a solemn tone. The saints of the Red Religion blessed by R'hllor had a divine aura, but compared to Lorien, they were two different worlds. To the ignorant eyes of ordinary people, this kind of aura was invisible, but to him it couldn't be clearer than sunlight. But compared to the saints, Lorien's divine aura was like a huge sun, covering tens of kilometers. Even before entering the city, Bonero saw the divine aura and was completely shocked. If Lorien had known Bonero's thoughts, he would have been surprised at what the high priest was saying about his smell, a smell that monsters used to hunt demigods. As for how far he could smell, Lorien was the son of Zeus, a god king, so it could be said that few demigods could compare to him. Let's get down to business, what you want. Lorien spoke in a calm tone, changing the subject. He wouldn't start an argument by trying to convince him that he wasn't a god. Instead of wasting time, it was better to talk business. I came because of a vision of the future in the sacred flames of the temple of Planetos. Bonero lost his smile and spoke with a solemn tone. Makoro, who was always behind him, also showed an expression tinged with a touch of fear. Lorien couldn't help but wonder what could make these powerful men show such solemn expressions. I saw a giant dwelling in the body of a bastard. I saw 14 volcanoes awaken in agony. And from their bowels emerged 14 horrors. A three-headed dragon led that horde. And under its wings, the ruin of mankind was approaching. Bonero spoke with a solemn and calm tone, but even this man, who was hundreds of years old, couldn't help but feel a twinge of fear at the mention of the vision he had seen. Lorien stood erect and his casual posture disappeared completely. Although he had assumed that Chornos might have come with him to this world, he now had confirmation that he was right and Chornos really was in this world. As for the bastard he was occupied with, the first name that came to mind was Jon Snow, then came the name of young Griff, also known as Aegon Targaryen, the sixth of his name. Another name was Orain Waters. However, Lorien knew that this was relative, there were so many bastards in the world that it would be difficult to find who Chornos was inhabiting. There was a smile on Lorien's lips. Dear grandfather, I can't kill you in Greece, but in this world, where you are seriously injured, I can kill you. If Lorien had been afraid of Chornos, he wouldn't have fought the Cannibal Titan, especially now that Chornos had fallen to the point where he needed a human host to survive. Looking at Bonero, Lorien was direct with his words. High Priest, I expect you to look for anything strange, especially involving time. Bonero nodded and flashed a smile across his lipless mouth. Don't worry, Your Grace, before I came to Myr, I already ordered my spies to look for the bastard. I would help you fight the Night King and the Cold God. In return, I want the full support of the Red Faith. Lorien spoke as he held out his hand, looking into Bonero's eyes with a solemn gaze full of determination. All of the Red Faith is yours to use, Your Grace. Bonero's smile couldn't have been wider at that moment. Having a true god agree to be Azor Ahai was the best possible choice. Squeezing Lorien's hand, Lorien and Bonero looked at each other and smiled, both sensing that this would be a very pleasant partnership. Chapter 17 The Night of Conspiracies. While the conversation with Bonero and Lorien was going on, Seastorm was naturally doing what he had been asked to do. The dwarf, covered in black cloths, stood on a branch, looking into the mansion with a sharp, penetrating gaze. An excited smile crossed Seastorm's lips and he disappeared into the lightning and wind. There was no sound, only the faint resonance of the wind itself. Even Lorien couldn't use wind and lightning as well as Seastorm. The reason was obvious, Seastorm was a being of pure energy while Lorien was flesh and blood. Joran, who was drinking in his office, seemed happier than ever. Being free of Khal Drogo's worry was something he had always hoped for. Now without the Horse Lord's shadow over his head, he could concentrate on becoming richer and finally avenging his brother's death at Dorano's hands. Remembering the sight of his brother wasting away in bed from the poison, Joran's face turned cold and murderous. He knew more than anyone that it was Dorano who had poisoned his brother. Years ago, during the elections, Dorano had lost most of the votes to his brother. Unfortunately, his brother trusted that Dorano would have some pride, but forgot that the world was a cruel and cold place. With the death of Joran's brother, the supporters naturally switched sides and chose Dorano, who had increased the bribes. If it hadn't been for Joran's speed and courage, he himself wouldn't have been elected as magistrate and would have completely missed the chance to rise to the core of Myr's power. Fortunately, the arrival of Lorien was an extremely good thing for him. If he conquered Lorien, don't tell Dorano, even if there were 100 more Dorano wouldn't be enough to fight a 14-year-old golden warrior. Even if Dorano dared to try to fight Lorien, would his supporters accept becoming the enemy of a warrior with so much potential? Tapping his finger rhythmically on the chair, his face illuminated by the flickering flames showed a malicious and cruel smile. You killed my brother, I'm going to kill your children, wives and brothers, I won't stop until your bloodline is gone. Dorano could be cruel, but compared to Joran, he was still very kind. Joran was a typical extremely vindictive villain, cruel to himself and even crueler to his own enemies. If someone offended him, they'd better run away as quickly as possible or suffer 100 times more. Just as Joran was thinking of ways he could weaken Dorano, a sudden gale blew out all the surrounding candles, bringing darkness to the whole room. Joran was startled and looked at his surroundings with a calm gaze. No matter how much you've received, I can give double, not triple. As he said this, he had already pulled a rope from beneath his desk. This rope was connected to a bell in the room of someone he trusted. Once this rope was pulled, it meant that he was in danger and should ring the main bell of the mansion, alerting Garrick, who lived not far away. A funny laugh sounded in the office. Even in the darkness, a pair of golden eyes opened, staring at Joran in the darkness. Suddenly, the sound of a bell rang out throughout the mansion, making Joran's expression relax slightly. Now he only had to stay alive for a minute for Garrick to arrive and kill him. However, just as Joran was about to speak to buy time, he felt an agonizing pain in his stomach and looked down. Although it was dark, he could see the faint glint of the blade embedded in his stomach. Arg! A painful groan sounded as he felt another stab in his stomach. He desperately tried to move away and ended up falling off the chair. He dragged himself up as he began to scream. Assassin! Killer! Killer! The sound of heavy footsteps came to Seastorm's ears. He knew he had to leave because the Silver Warrior was coming. Plunging his dagger into Joran's calf, the storm spirit left without any hesitation. 10 seconds later, Garrick, wearing light leather armor appeared in Joran's office, his eyes quickly finding Joran crawling on the floor with a large bloodstain left behind. Garrick's face changed dramatically. He acted quickly and picked up the magistrate's body, running towards the doctor at the mention. He prayed to the water goddess that Joran would survive or this city would fall into total chaos even before Khal Drogo arrived. The news of the attempted assassination of the magistrate spread quickly. Even before sunrise, most families already knew what had happened. This made the atmosphere inside the city very tense. One of the city's rulers had had an assassination attempt. No matter who did it, it was a serious crime. Some eyes were focused on the Tully's family mansion. The feud between the Tully's family and Vhassel was known to all. Rumors soon began to circulate. After all, it was most likely that such a good killer had to be someone of equal or greater status than Joran. Along with the feud between the families, it was impossible to say that Dorano was exempt from suspicion, as he was the biggest suspect. That's exactly why the families realized that things had become even more complicated. The tension was almost tangible in the air. Anyone with an ounce of political sense would know that this was the calm before the storm. Lorien really does act decisively. Nerys whispered to the other two women in the room with a genuinely admiring tone. If it had been her, she would have hesitated for a few days before actually embarking on such a grand conspiracy. It's precisely because he's fast that the greatest suspicion is not on him, but on Magistrate Dorano. Rayella brought the cup of tea to her lips and commented with an equally admiring tone. She really admired the ability to decide quickly and decisively. If her son Rhaegar had at least half of Lorien's determination, he would have dethroned Aerys and the things that happened would perhaps never happen again. Unfortunately, there is no if in this world, only choices and choices decide the future. Daenerys was also smiling happily. This feeling of taking part in such a grand conspiracy was fascinating. It seemed that the whole city had become a chessboard where she could control everyone's lives. She finally realized why all the kings were power-hungry. This feeling of controlling everyone's life was simply a poison corrupting people's will. Slapping her own cheeks lightly, Daenerys woke up from this intoxicating feeling and felt a little afraid. She had to remind herself that she wasn't a powerful golden warrior to plot against a city with millions of inhabitants. The conspiracy was working because Lorien was sustained by his power as a golden warrior. Even if the conspiracy succeeded and she successfully usurped the power of Myr, she had no doubt that all the families would rebel against her and the whole process would fail. Lorien could do this because everyone would obey him, because disobeying him meant death and the extinction of one's bloodline. Daenerys definitely didn't have the deterrent power to intimidate an entire city and eventually her usurpation would fail. Suddenly, the sound of someone knocking on the door was heard and the conversation in the room stopped. The three pairs of eyes stared at the door and when they heard the female voice of one of Olsen's slaves, they relaxed. Rhaella stood up and opened the door. She saw a slave holding a letter. Master Olsen asked me to deliver it to the queen. The woman answered with a respectful tone and in the process, only looked at Rhaella's feet, not daring to look up. Rhaella took the letter and looked at the woman. She had to admit, she hated slavery. She knew exactly what it was like to be betrothed to your own identity, to be confined to a room and beaten every night. You can go. Rhaella said with a gentle tone and watched the slave leave with her back arched. What is it? Nerys asked with a curious tone. Looking at the letter, Daenerys shared the same curiosity. Rhaella didn't answer and opened the letter. Looking at the contents, she couldn't help but think that Lorien was really quick at doing things. Magistrate Doreno was murdered as he was about to leave for the magistrate's palace. The assassin failed to kill the magistrate, but he seriously wounded the magistrate. Rhaella looked at her daughters and spoke with a still surprised tone. Daenerys and Nerys looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Lorien really was decisive. Chapter 18 The Night of Conspiracies. At the Tully's family mansion. Doreno was in bed with a somber expression. He had just been informed that his leg would have to be amputated because the wound had started to necrotize, and if the leg wasn't cut off, it would spread throughout his body, eventually killing him. Joran. A look of pure hatred and rage appeared on the magistrate's face. It was revenge for what he had done to Joran's brother, Josen. Previously, before the attack, Doreno was very happy to hear that Joran had suffered an assassination attempt, and he even regretted that the assassin hadn't completed the mission. But after suffering the same fate, he just wanted to destroy everything in his path. Now, he thought that Joran's assassination was orchestrated by Joran himself, all with the purpose of showing that he, Doreno, started the war and Joran was retaliating. Thinking about this, he knew his reputation would be ruined if he didn't do anything. You dare to frame me and send assassins after me, I will make you suffer 1,000 times worse than losing a leg. Doreno murmured with a terrifyingly cold tone. Since Joran had crossed all boundaries, he would do the same. Looking at his butler, Doreno spoke devoid of any emotion. Have Joran's 6-year-old son poisoned. Remember to kill the assassin and leave no trace. Also, strengthen the defenses and search all the cooks. Yes, master. The butler felt a tightness in his chest hearing such cold orders regarding a simple and innocent child. However, as a slave, he only had to obey or lose the job he had worked so hard to get. Joran. The magistrate's name came out between clenched teeth and a contracting jaw. He promised himself that Joran would pay for making him lose a leg. The city looks like it's going to explode at any moment. Daenerys commented, looking at Lorien beside her, who was eating toast, sausages, and eggs with a glass of juice. She had a similar breakfast on her plate. It's still a little while off, but it's close. Biting the toast, Lorien replied with a calm and thoughtful tone. He himself hadn't expected things to happen so quickly. It was obvious that he had underestimated the influence the magistrates had over Myr. Daenerys nodded and became anxious about what was about to happen. What if something happens and changes the plans, or everything fails and both magistrates reconcile? She was a little nervous and had reason to be, because if it leaked, everything would be thrown away. Noticing this, Lorien smiled and bit the toast with an amused look. Although she was quite cruel when it came to causing harm to enemies, it didn't change the fact that she was a teenager. However, he found this normal. When Daenerys went through important events and matured, she could become as calm as he was. Eat and relax. If something happens, I'll simply kill all the magistrates and then occupy the city with power. Lorien commented with a laugh. Although this method had many flaws, he didn't mind going back to being a tyrant. He didn't believe that if he killed all the dissidents, there would be people stupid enough to fight him. Daenerys pouted her lips and murmured to herself. Easy for him to say, my heart is almost exploding in my chest. Although murmuring this, she put the conspiracy aside and looked at Lorien with curiosity. I heard that important figures from the Red Faith came to visit you. Daenerys spoke with a curious look. Myr only had a few small temples, so an important figure from the church could only come from Planetos, where the Temple of Light is located. High Priest Benerro and Makoro, the Black Flame. Lorien didn't hide it and spoke directly. He couldn't help but remember the vision of the future that the High Priest spoke of. He spent the whole night trying to guess the vision. 14 monsters and a 3-headed dragon, where have I heard about that? Lorien murmured with a confused look. The answer seemed to be on the tip of his tongue, but every time he tried to find those memories, they slipped through his hands. This was extremely irritating. Daenerys's mouth opened wide enough to fit an egg. She widened her eyes and was shocked by what she had just heard. Benerro, the High Priest of the Red Temple of Planetos. That name was something everyone knew. He was a powerful fire mage with the strength of a golden mage. Makoro was equally famous as a golden warrior in his prime strength. The Black Flame of Planetos made even Bravos look at Planetos with caution. I will have lunch with them. If you wish, come with me. You can bring your mother and sister. Lorien invited her with an amused smile on his lips. Daenerys's shocked appearance was truly adorable. Especially with her cheeks flushed with excitement. I will. How could Daenerys miss the chance to meet someone so important? She also couldn't help but look at Lorien with more curiosity. She couldn't believe that one of the most powerful men on the continent would actually come to Myr to meet him. I will become the Azor Ahai of the Red Faith, and in return, they will give me support in everything I want. As if guessing her thoughts, Lorien spoke with a smile. He was also very satisfied with the agreement reached the night before. The Red Faith's help would save him a lot of time. Daenerys widened her eyes even more. This was something very important. With the help of the Red Temple, they would have everything. Money, weapons, armor, and people, especially people. When it came to metallurgy, the Red Faith was famous for creating their own armor and swords, which unfortunately were only used by themselves. Lorien, they are famous for creating armor and weapons. They probably have a stock of armor that we can use to arm an entire army. Daenerys spoke with a bright look. Even though she was young, she knew one thing. Armor, swords, and spears were of utmost importance to any army. You greedy little dragon, we haven't even started working with them and you're already eyeing their coffers. Lorien couldn't help but speak with an amused smile, hearing Daenerys's words, but just like her, he was also full of curiosity about the coffers of the Red Religion. You call me a greedy dragon, but you are equally greedy. Daenerys smiled at Lorien and also looked at him with a teasing look. She would sooner believe that pigs could fly than believe that Lorien wasn't interested in the coffers of the Red Religion, the largest religion in Essos that had lasted for thousands of years. Eat, we have a long way to go to achieve our ambitions, and we need to be wealthed for that. Lorien didn't answer and spoke with an amused laugh. If it weren't for Rhaella and Nerys being busy, this breakfast would be even more lively. It had been a long time since he had talked to another human being at breakfast. Daenerys nodded but showed a thoughtful expression. She noticed that instead of saying my ambition, he said our ambition, which brought a smile to her lips. Humming a song, Daenerys ate with more intensity while smiling. While breakfast was happening peacefully in the mansion, the entire city seemed tense, as if something was about to happen at any moment. The news of the assassination attempts on both magistrates had caused the city to almost stop. No one dared to leave their homes. The few who did rushed out to buy food and quickly returned. It wasn't the first time magistrates had fought for power. There were typical examples of armies confronting each other in the streets. Once that happened, anyone on the streets would be destroyed by the collision of the two armies. This wasn't a game where you were reborn after dying. They only had one life and valued it more than anything. The people knew that something was happening and didn't want to get involved. In the end, they didn't care who was in power. As long as they had a stable environment, they could even accept a horse in the position of magistrate. Suddenly, even fiercer news swept through the city. And within a few hours, even people on the outskirts of the city knew what had happened. Never underestimate the power of human capacity to gossip about famous people. Magistrate Joran's son died after eating a cake. The poison was identified as tears of Lee. Even the most foolish knew that things had escalated to a point of no return. A war was inevitable. Read the advanced chapters on my Patreon. Gots. To be continued.